Well, thanks everybody. We're so happy that you've come, and Jason, who is one of our associate deans, I'm sure you all know Jason. We've been planning to do this a set of workshops for a while now, but life got in the way. So we're glad we're finally getting to do this. And maybe this timing is actually more apropos because I think people have had time to think a little bit about the coming changes and maybe formulate some questions, some direct and more succinct questions. Anyway, this workshop is designed to facilitate suddenly I'm saying conservation instead of conversation among faculty. We want there to be a community of people around this change, this particular change, that can share ideas. We've also, the writing program has created a website of materials that I'll be showing you later that you can share with your folks in your department if they have questions. But we're hoping that you all here on the screen today will become the experts that people can talk to about what did Jason say about so-and-so, or what did Joanna say about something, or where are those materials? We will be putting an edited version of this workshop on the website, on the writing program also. And if I can find time, I might even do a voice over PowerPoint. We'll see what is allowed. But already, all the things I'm going to refer you to are already on the website and ready for your use. Oh, great. There's Anna. All right. So I'm going to share my screen, and if you can forgive me, I'm going to just do what I normally don't do in a workshop. I'm going to talk to you for a while. Usually there's like an activity to get us going, but because we only have an hour and we want to allow at least 30 or 35 minutes for questions and conversation, I will present the materials, which I think will answer some of your questions, maybe create new ones, and then we'll open it up for conversation. All right. Oops, I don't think, is it sharing the right screen, Jason?
Yeah, morphing W into continuing communication. Good. You're good now.
On my screen, it always shows that it's sharing my background for some reason, which is bizarre. Okay. All right. So I'm using the title Morphing, a continuing writing class into continuing communication, because I have the firm belief that most of us are already doing this. And all you really have to learn how to do is to talk about what you're doing, maybe tweak it a little bit, unless you're a person that does like 3 assignments and they're all the same. You know, so you would be the kind of teacher that might have to make a little more change in your class. But I think most of the time we're going to find it small changes. Okay, if I can get this to switch. There we go. So this is actually pulled off of the OUE website, and you'll see the down here, you'll see the link to that. And I've highlighted some things in blue to pay attention to. This is not unlike continuing writing, except now the choice of writing assignment seems a lot bigger. I use writing and communication interchangeably sometimes, and I'm sorry about that. But notice the blue text. Communication and instruction is intended to occur throughout the semester, not be like a big project that happens like at the end of the semester. The teacher is the communication mentor, or any TAs that you have, and your job is to help the students enter into the discourse of your discipline. So process is really important with this GER. Things like coming up with the thing to write about, which we call invention, researching, drafting, revision, and editing. It's the same kind of process that we've always used. Finally, writing and other forms of communication exercises are supposed to be important to the learning of the course and not just tacked on. So in other words, when you assess what students learn in your course, part of that assessment needs to be those communication assignments. Like, what do they teach you and what do they show you? All right, there's some important questions you need to ask yourself. We're not going to take time and talk about them now, but I just want you to get to thinking about them. What is the importance of communication in your discipline? Think about the kinds of things that people in your field do. Do they write blog posts? Do they create websites? Do they do research writing? Do they write annotated bibliographies that actually get published? Do they do book reviews and performance reviews? All sorts of, do they do op-eds in the newspaper? You know, if you can sort of get your head around that, why do people do that in my field and why is it important? You kind of can think about your own class then in new ways. And then why are you a good person to teach communication in your field? All our faculty here are communicators. And I personally believe that the higher up you go in rank, the more important communication is, because you're called on to do, like Andra does, NPR interviews all the time, those kinds of things. So I think that because you are a good communicator, you're so familiar with your field, you're actually the perfect person to mentor students into communication in your field. So this is also from the Senate website, sort of a summary of what we're asking for in our communication classes. We've got a set of student outcomes that we're going to talk in detailed about in a minute. One is required on every syllabus, and then you get a choice of other things, and you can blend those in with your own outcomes for your content area. We also believe that communication ought to be taught as a process, which means you ought to use scaffolding. There ought to be a chance for students to get some feedback from a peer or from a teacher, and then do some revision on their projects. We want all syllabi to include a statement about the Writing Center, and we'll show you where that is. And again, communication assignments are integral to the course. So when you build your course description, you should have a sentence or two in there about learning about how to communicate in your field is a part of the learning of that course. And then also we'd like to have a short list of communication assignments on your syllabus, so you give the students an example. So here are the kinds of things we're going to do in this course, so that we can see how communication assignments fit in your course. We're asking that you have 2 different modes or genres of communication. We're going to talk about that at length. And then 3 different assignments. And it should be 40% of the grade, which it always has been. And what you notice is missing here is the 20 polish pages, right? Because now that becomes less important as we think about some of these assignments might be oral or they might be digital. You know, they might be information design assignments. So we're opening up the bucket to include a lot of things, but nearly all the things that you could still do in your class is still backed up by writing. So writing is still required. You know, it's still going on in these classes. So let's talk a little bit about mode or genre. In my field, I know what mode or genre does. I know how they interact with each other. But as I got to looking around and fielding questions from faculty, I realized that people in different disciplines may have a different understanding of these. One of the reasons the GER committee put both terms in there is so that we would communicate to you that it's not, we really don't care how you interpret these terms. What we would like you to do is have 3 different kinds of assignments. So what the words mean is less important than understanding that our new GER wants to promote flexibility and adaptability in our students' abilities to communicate through their client assignments in class. So a class that, for example, required 3 critical essays and they were all exactly the same, that would not be meet the requirements of this new GER. But thinking about like having the students do 2 critical essays, and maybe one of them is a little different from the other, and maybe you include a presentation, Or if one of them is actually a research project, you could scaffold in the research. You could have them do a proposal, an annotated bibliography. You could include a digital project. So like with one of the critical essays, you could say, what would this look like as a podcast? And so you have the students do the writing and actually record the podcast, or even compose a digital poster. And those are just examples. Scholars in our field have for a long time have encouraged faculty to think more about having students design and redesign texts, not simply to write them. And already we have a lot of faculty do that. I know in my writing for publication class, when they do their book proposal, I actually have them design a book cover for it, even though no publisher would ever want them to do that. And then they reflect on how that book cover is another way of talking about their book proposal. So those kinds of things can happen. So we'd like you to think about the kinds of communication that's important in your field, and then ask this question: what kind of speaking, reflecting, writing, performing, information designing, or social media creation happens in your field? Would some of these be relevant for your content? So, okay. So this is way too busy a slide, but since we're online, I went ahead and did it. If this was in person, this would not be appropriate. But you'll see down here a little link to our website that talks about the expansive view of writing, which basically is communication. You can see from looking at these two, the vast variety of things you might consider doing along with writing. I could imagine in different fields, some of these would be more interesting. But I'll give you an example. So let's say that you wanted your students to create a podcast series in your class. Notice this one, you still have to have them, let's see here, script it, revise it, maybe practice it, and then record it, and then edit it before it goes on the podcast. So there's a lot of writing that goes on, even when it's basically an oral product. And I've told people before that one of the things, if you want to do one of these more interesting things, how could you take a writing assignment that you've already got the students to do, you've scaffolded in the work, and then have them do this other thing that wouldn't be like new research, new work, but rather a translation of something they've written in one form to another form, maybe for a public audience instead of an academic audience. But that would save you class time. All you'd have to do is teach the form and not have to teach that content over again. So anyway, that's there for your use as it is helpful. This is also, I've got several links to our Emory writing website. The subcommittee that reviews these proposals will be looking for a few things. First of all, we'll look to make sure you've got 3 assignments, right? At least 3. And that somehow they're scaffolded into the course in a way that supports the learning in the course. Now, I've got a workshop already built about scaffolding. If you really don't understand what that means, you can go to that workshop and find out all about it. We also are going to be looking for a chance to revise, and that could be peer instructor. And I've got a workshop built on peer response and a workshop built on how to respond to student writing, different kinds of methods. And then finally, we want to see your plans for communication instruction. So you just don't want to say, hey, I want you to do a podcast. Go out and find out how to do that. I know that sounds silly, but you'd be surprised. Maybe you provide a reading that you put on Canvas for them. Or maybe you have an assignment from a previous semester that you could put up to show them a model for how students did it. And if you need a model and don't have one, you might contact the Writing Center because they might be able to help you with that. You could have Writing Center staff visit and help them through a particular assignment with some communication instruction. And then finally, that you've set aside some kind of instruction time, either in class or out of class, but it's structured and they have to do it. It counts for something where they can actually get some peer review. And if you ever need help, like designing good peer review sessions from the get-go, this workshop has information about that. So this is from all the many materials that we've looked at of late about backward course design. But the gist of it is that whenever we design a course, we want to expose students to as much as we can in a course, right? So there's a lot of things that are worth being familiar with. But then down deeper, we think, okay, so here are the important things I want them to know and do. But at the very core, there are always one or two things that you want them to take out of the class that stick with them. Sticky learning, we call it. We hope that your communication exercises actually connect to this sticky learning, because we've learned, scholars tell us and researchers tell us that the things that students remember the most are the things they do. All right, so we would like these communication courses to be scaffolded, just like your writing course is. So think about this. What are your objectives? What do you want students to learn or do in that part of the course? And then how do you activate prior knowledge? And if it's very first thing in the class, maybe it'll be prior knowledge from other experiences they've had. But if it's later in the course, like how do your earlier assignments feed into that assignment? What skills have they learned that they can build into that? And then finally, or not finally, but what are the low-stake communication activities that you plan to scaffold in to help them do what they need to do? So if you're going to do a podcast series, that means you need to teach them a little bit about, give them a little bit of practice about using the voice, right? You need to teach them a little bit of technology. You might want to invite David Morgan to your class from our program to help the students get familiar with Audible or some other kind of tool, and then let them practice with it a bit before they actually get to the high stakes assignment. And then how do you envision this as the culminating performance for the part of the course? So maybe you've got students building a portfolio, a communication portfolio. How do they decide what gets pushed in there? How do they edit it? And maybe you create a handout to help them understand that. And then finally, we have learned, Jason and I, and we're on a committee that assessed the continuing writing requirement a couple of years ago. And one of the things we learned is that all the teachers appreciated adding reflection into their class. So having students reflect on the learning outcomes and include the communication outcomes in a part of that could be really important. And I will add that a reflection essay is another genre, another mode. All right, so the building blocks of a continuing communication class. You're going to have goals from your course that comes from your discipline and topic, your content area, and then you're going to have goals for your major communication project. And that will demonstrate that the communication assignments are not just tacked on, but they're actually built into the course. Then you're going to have disciplinary content and assignments and projects, lectures, tests, discussions, whatever you do. And then finally, the scaffolding of communication activities throughout the course, which helps the students to develop the habit of thinking through their communication assignments. So let's look at the outcomes that your committee, the working group, actually came up with. The first one is the required outcome, communicate to learn. And you can sort of understand why we thought that one would be important, not only to all of our classes, but also to our possible future assessments of the communication requirement. How do students in your class use communication as a form of inquiry, invention, and reflection? And if you can think about those terms, so they could use communication assignments to come up with things to say, to develop a serious inquiry into a topic, and then to reflect about what they've learned. And then you can choose from any of these three as befits your class. This first one, communicate flexibly, is an outcome that would be really good for faculty that are teaching a class that has, if they're doing translation assignments. So let's say you're having them do a writing research project, and then they're going to do a presentation, and maybe spin out of that a blog post or an op-ed for a public audience. You're teaching students how to communicate to different audiences. So if you're doing that in your class, you might choose outcome. Communicate contribute might be for a class that's more seriously focused on communication in the field, right? So if you're having them do a proposal and an annotated bibliography and an outline, and then a final research proposal with a presentation, you could choose this outcome because it would definitely fit that particular assignment. Like, how do students communicate to people in their field? How do they enter the conversation? And then this last one, communicate critically, would be, so they're thinking about big options here, like, how does my communication, how is it ethical, right? Or how does it run across ideological dimensions? So if you're teaching a course that's really interdisciplinary and doing a lot of things with a lot of different themes across time or space, this might be a good choice. I remember when we developed this, I thought this would be a really good one for philosophy classes, for example, it seemed to me. So what makes good communication? I think most of us know it when we hear it, but articulating it might be a little more difficult. The communication needs to be voiced. So it's not just dry, rote repetition of research findings. We want the writer or the speaker or the performer to take responsibility for our understanding as an audience member. We want them to guide us through the process with whatever performance they're giving us. And what makes it good is that the writer knows how to use transitions that help the audience move from point to point, cues that are consistent with our discipline expectations. That's what voicing is all about. We feel like we're being talked to by a person in control with a real sense of authority, right? And that leads to the next one. Communication has some authority and composure appropriate to the discipline's expectations. And this would look really different from creative writing and from biology. So what does authority mean? How do you compose with some sort of ethos as a trustworthy communicator? And then the communication makes a difficult subject easier for the audience to understand rather than increasingly more difficult. We have all read a book at some point in our life, I don't know about you, that hit the wall. I tend to throw them against the wall, but it's so dense I can't make sense out of it. I appreciate a communicator who can help me understand difficult materials, not to make it more complex. And then finally, and that has to do with clarity, right? Clarity. And then finally, the communication has organization and cohesion, and it makes sense. You can follow it logically, and it means you don't have to reread sections or re-listen to sections. You got it because it was clearly organized. And then we might even bring this down a little bit. What makes good academic communication? Scholars tell us that clear evidence that the writer-performer has been persistent and open-minded and disciplined goes a long way in academic communication. Have they done the background reading? Have they been reflective and paid attention? Have they internalized knowledge and insight, and they're able to speak about it and generalize about it, and then use the details to support those assertions? Also, we know that in academic discourse, that the ability to use reason, not to be over emotional, is very important. And in that use of reason, we want to see fairness in the use of sources, carefulness in the choice of sources, and clearly can analyze competing positions and actually makes reference of them, right? That's part of fairness. We also believe that the writer in an academic community ought to address an audience that they can assume is also rational, wants information, and is trying to form a reasoned response. So that means addressing potential objections and creating an argumentative ethos that's trustworthy. You don't do things that people can't respond to. You take advantage of the larger conversation. And I'm sure all of you already knew that, but it's always good. What went for writing is equally true about all communication. So one of the nice things about this new GER is that not only can you use your communication assignments to assess, the kind of learning your students are doing, but you could also use it to help your own program assess the learning that they do in the program. And I've got examples here. This is our Emory first year writing portfolio assessment. Feel free to poke around in that and see how we do that. And there we use reflection projects and portfolios to try to figure out what students are actually learning in first year writing. And then over here, we've got a workshop on responding to student writing that can help you and show you how you can develop rubrics, portfolio grading, peer grading, and even contract grading in your communication classes. And then I've got some sample syllabi here. These are on the web now too. Two people, friends of mine, were gracious enough to give me their syllabi that I knew were already doing the kind of work we wanted them to do. And I just made a few tweaks in the syllabus to show you what we're talking about. So this takes a little bit of jiggering around. All right. Can you see the syllabus?
We're not seeing it yet, Joanna.
And now I can't find the syllabus. Let me, there it is. I need like 4 screens.
Right.
Right. That's all I need, right? Nope, wrong one. Try again. You would think after 2 or 3 years of doing this, that this would be easier. I'm not seeing my document. That's weird. Let me try one more time. Well, Jason, I can't get the, that is, oh, there it is. Okay. Got it.
Can you
There
drop
it goes.
the can you drop the URL into the chat so we can look at it ourselves?
I'll go find it, Joanna, and drop it into the chat.
Thank you. And I can do it later too if we need to. All right. So here are the learning outcomes. As you can see, she has added this note that because the course fulfills the continuing writing communication requirement, it is designed with the following outcomes in mind. She's got the one required one, and then she decided to do communicate to contribute. And then she's got 2 of her own outcomes, which I thought were wonderful. And we'll go down here a little bit. And this is a very brief description of her assignments, which I think is probably fine. On my syllabi, they're going to be a little longer, but I think this is okay. So note that the above varied communication assignments, which includes digital, oral, and written, designed to give you opportunities to try your hand at communicating about the sciences. And I say she, this is Tony actually, so it's he. And the assignments are scaffolded in a way that allow you for continued practice and growth. And there's a final portfolio and a reflection. So sort of a heads up to the students about what they will doing. But we'll get down here. There is the Writing Center, little block text in there. And let's see, seems to me there was something else of interest here. Oh, I know that Tony uses a set of essays that actually help students with writing in the sciences that he found. I don't see them right here, although this book, Houston, Why Science Needs a Story, is actually about the importance of narrative in science writing. So he does have some work there for students to look at. All right. Let me show you the Italian syllabus now. All right, I saw this syllabus last year on the committee, and it just rocked my world. So I asked Christine if she would allow me to share it, and she did. So notice how it's a continuing communications class, and she actually puts in here communication expectations, which is just delighted me. She tells them like what time frame she will need to communicate, and how to contact her and what not to do, which I really appreciated. Then she's got, notice, a writing handbook here, which means that she's taking seriously that she wants students to learn to write, and the artful edit on how to edit yourself. She's got the Writing Center website there, and how to set up a conference with a Writing Center tutor. So she's foregrounding the fact that this is communications, and here's all this stuff on here which shows the students this is really important. All right, let's look down here. So here's her course description, and she has a sentence that says, along the way, we're going to learn how to communicate effectively about our learning. So that's great. And then here's her learning outcomes. She's got 3 of her own, and she has adapted our learning outcome, but tagged them so we can recognize them. And it's very similar to the outcome on the sheet. And then she chose communicate critically because they're working on big issues like social justice. So that outcome seems to fit it really well. And let's see here. She's got objectives on top of that. And I know we've got her assignments down here somewhere. All right, she's got lots of great descriptions of her assignments. So her homework projects, they are completed out of class, but she is signaling to them that she wants them to engage in activities during class and to talk. So both of them are communication. When they do a homework, they've got stuff in class that fits the communication requirement. There's going to be campus quizzes, group presentations every Thursday. Isn't that interesting? So that means people are either going to be speaking or watching every Thursday, once a week. And they have weekly prompts to write about. So that's another genre. They're going to do an imitation piece every other week. It looks like they're going to be doing some poetry, imitating poetry on this, which is interesting. They're going to write an op-ed piece every 2 weeks. And then they're going to put together their best pieces and in a final portfolio. So when I look at her class, I see not a lot of big papers, but lots and lots of small things that are fitting our requirements. And this one, she's got Italian club participation, which is another discussion thing and attending, and then creative cultural activities. So they have to attend things and 2 creative events and write a paragraph about them. And there's the Writing Center blog. All right. So I just think that's pretty remarkable. And it shows that how moving to this continuing communication project taking out the 20 polished pages really changes what you can do. You can be a lot more creative in the way you design your assignments. I don't think I'm going to go into the other syllabi. I think I will allow you to, look on at your own. There are 2 examples from the writing program, and we may have done things a little bit differently, but why don't we open this up for questions? And luckily, Jason is here to help us with technical questions and things like that. All right, anybody? Yeah, Julia?
First of all, just want to confirm assignments can be in languages not English only, right? Just want to confirm that.
Yeah, in fact, I want to tell you that when we did our assessment 2 or 3 years ago, one of the questions we had was, should language classes continue to be a part of this requirement? And we were really impressed with the results we got from the language classes. So absolutely.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that this change wasn't going to stop that, understand that communication is not just English. Okay, the other thing too is just something that I've found as a teacher is I think it's important for students to, and us, to let students understand that communication is not just expression. Good communication is very much a feedback loop. And students, I'm finding students uncomfortable with feedback. But they need to understand that's part of a good communication course. Feedback is really important. Maybe it's because of the online experience some of our students have solely had or not. I find I have to actually state this multiple times in my current writing course, so they understand this is our way to support you to be even more effective. Because they're very sensitive, seeing feedback as criticism instead of the way to make something even stronger, and recognize there's an audience involved with effective communication.
Right. One of the things I try to do in my class, it works for me, is that I start the feedback loop really early in the semester, as early as possible. And I teach them first how to be supportive. Like, okay, let's say good things. Because people don't know what they do good. And then gradually, as people get accustomed to that, I'll say, okay, now tell people one thing they can do to improve, right? Let's start talking about that. And then I start modeling it myself. And before they know it, they're much better at it. And they learn how to do it kindly. I think all of us have had harsh criticism, and it's not pleasant. So there's other ways to do it. Right. Yes, Juana?
I have a question. I guess it's on the GER side of things. For the existing courses that already have a writing tag, is there some process that we need to go through to apply with the new communications tag?
Yes, Juana. So by May 15th, we're asking departments to submit proposals through the GER tagging website. And we realize for some departments that might be a very heavy lift if you have dozens and dozens of writing courses. And so you definitely want to focus on courses that will be taught next year. If you can submit everything, that's great. But the tagging website will be active through May 15th. And then after that, the proposals will go through the regular curriculum committee channel. We are asking departments to upload syllabi, and the syllabi should reflect the new requirements of continuing communication. So they should have the learning outcomes, the one required learning outcome plus one additional learning outcome. They should show that there's at least 3 assignments worth 40%, that they cover 2 modes of communication. There should be a writing center statement and some indication or attention to the process of communication in the syllabus. And if the syllabus is clear and it has all of those elements, we don't need you to write a narrative explanation. The form will have a box for that, but just say see syllabus. The other thing that the form will ask for is which learning outcomes the course is meeting. But really, you just need the learning outcomes and the updated syllabus to submit the courses.
Thank you.
Right, I'll tell you all that Melissa Yang and I decided to update our syllabi to that, and both of us, it only took us about 20 or 30 minutes to do one. Yeah, Noelle?
Thanks. I just had a quick question about going back to the languages. If our syllabi are in a foreign language, then we'll have to submit a translated syllabi, I assume. I just want to make sure, because we're going to have, like, for our 400 level courses, everything's in French.
Right.
So I just want to make, so it's not like we can submit the syllabi and then put everything in the little box that says, all right.
I think in that case, Noelle, what I would suggest is you upload the syllabus in French, and then in the box, just include a few sentences explaining what those assignments are.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, we could translate it into English, but I just don't know if that's
you could if you
Okay.
want to. Yeah.
Okay.
But I realize that's a lot of work too. So if it's easier to just write a few sentences in the
Okay.
explanation box, that would be fine. I think there's a few of us on the expression and communication committee who can navigate French and some other languages, but probably not all of the languages that we offer here.
And can I ask a follow-up question to that? What do we, so then I think you might have just answered this, but if one of our classes is a topics class that just changes depending on the professor, that means we're just going to have to submit it for the writing tag every year?
So at this point, we are going to automatically tag the second semester of honors. So for most departments, that's 495 BW. And we are also going to tag your special topics option. So many of you offer a 385 and a 385W. So you don't need to submit a proposal for your special topics numbers at this point, but we have to have some more discussion with the expression and communication committee, but it looks like at the beginning of every semester, we're going to collect syllabi from any special topics courses that are being offered for communication. And those courses can move ahead and offer communication, but over the course of the semester, we'll read those and offer feedback to the faculty in case they're teaching those courses again under special topics, or they're eventually proposing them for a permanent course number.
So then for the next academic year, just make sure we have the ones submitted that are being taught the following year, or?
So you're not submitting any individual special topics courses through the form. What we'll do at the beginning of the semester, say, departments, if you're teaching special topics for communication, please provide your syllabi by X date.
Okay.
And it's not a proposal. It's going to be a review to help confirm that departments and faculty are actually doing what they're supposed to do when they're offering communication under special topics, and then an opportunity for feedback if there's any feedback that the committee wants to offer.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, this is actually a big improvement because we've never had any feedback on special topic syllabi before. Yeah, Catherine?
Yeah, a couple of things. I just want to say, also coming from languages, from teaching Spanish and Portuguese, I'm pretty thrilled with these changes and think it opens up a lot of possibilities for us to tag things with continuing communication that we hadn't previously tagged as writing. I think in large part because of that 20 polished pages thing that at our intermediate levels was just a lot for students to get to. But student presentations are built into pretty much all our classes. So I'm thinking maybe not by May, but maybe like this tag should go on Spanish 212 and Portuguese 202 that I teach and Portuguese 212 that Marilia teaches. So would that be the same form, the same process that we're going through for courses previously tagged W, or should we wait for the next phase to work on courses that have not had the writing?
So, yeah, at this point, we are only asking for proposals from courses that are carrying continuing writing. If it is a brand new course or it's a course that has not been offered under the writing tag before, then you would need to use the regular curriculum committee process. So submit either a new course proposal or a change to an existing course. And there are questions about continuing communication in both of those forms.
Okay, good deal. And then I also was intrigued by Christine Restaino's imitation assignments. And I'd been meaning to ask because I tend to teach classes where one of the assignments is a short story or creative nonfiction, occasionally a poem. And I don't know that it really makes sense to say it's part of communication in our field. It's not necessarily something that professors need to do, but it is a part of communication in languages. So do you have any thoughts on whether those are genres that are appropriate for?
I do, because I think you're teaching them flexibility. And, imitation is like one of the oldest forms of teaching people to write well, going back to the Greeks. So I think it definitely is. And it classifies as a genre.
Okay. Thank you.
Especially, Catherine, if you have them reflect on the process, then that's gold.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth?
Hi, thank you for all this. This has been super helpful. I teach a very large writing intensive class of 100 and so students. We have a class test very early on in the semester. Is a class test outside the criteria that you're talking about here, or is there a way to fold it in to communication?
Is it are they doing writing on the test, or is it multiple choice, or what is
They're
it?
doing writing, yeah.
They're doing writing. I actually consider small essay writing for tests actually a genre of writing. I don't know, Jason, what do you think the committee would feel about that?
I think that's right, so long as there's attention to process at some points in the class. And it might not necessarily be every assignment, but if you're giving a test, 2 tests as an assignment and one other assignment, and there's not a lot of attention to process and improvement and feedback, then I think that's where you'd run into some issues.
Right.
So you're interested in the overall feel of the syllabus, Jason. So there's a class test, and then there's the iterative process of writing that comes along about halfway through the semester.
Yep.
Right.
I know there was a time when English classes at the 200 level didn't really have papers. They just had these kind of essay tests. And I feel like I learned a lot from them. But what we did after the test is we actually had time before it thinking about preparation. We made outlines, thinking sort of through what possibilities. And then after the test was over, we had discussion and usually some reflection on like, how could I do better on the next assignment, those kinds of things. So there was like some process built in. So I don't know if yours has something like that, some preparation.
Well, I mean, it's all short answer. It's not essay writing, it's short answer writing. Okay. I mean, in order for them to be doing good writing later on, I need to know that they know what they're talking about. Right. So there needs to be some assessment that they've been in class and awake and paying attention, right? So it's part of the writing process in that sense. But my sense is that they don't particularly want to reflect on this. They just want to grade and they want to move on. Right. And that there is a tendency, these syllabus you showed us are super helpful, but they're full of busy work. And students get exhausted really quickly by this. And I find that their motivation drops really quickly. If I can't do it with 100 and some students.
Right.
Like I need to kind of contain a little bit what the assessment is.
Yeah.
So if I can make the test look more, there are 3 pieces of assessment in this course. If I can make it look more like it's part of the iterative writing that emerges later, then that would work.
Yeah. It sounds like it's actually a part of the scaffolding that you do for the bigger project, right? So
Well, in my brain, but that's not written down anywhere.
Yeah, well, I think,
I mean, that's why it's there. But the students don't care. The students don't care about that. They don't care to have that explained to them. They just know they have to turn up to do a test on this day.
But we don't really care what they think about it as long as it's working, right?
Okay.
So
right.
I think you could, in the little box, you could say the short answer tests are like a preparation for this bigger thing that they do, right?
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Yes, Cassidy?
So I think I have 2 questions. One is just a clarifying question about the continuing writing course that I'm teaching right now. And that is, I'm actually pretty happy with the writing process and keeping that course as a writing course. Is it a requirement to switch it to a communication course, or is it okay if it just stays? That's more of a clarification question.
Yeah, Cassidy, moving forward, we're not going to have writing courses. So everything's going to be a communication course. And what I will say, nobody's really asked about this, but essentially everything that's happening with continuing writing courses is going to carry over to continuing communication courses. So currently, you know that most courses are 3 credit hours, but they get an additional 4th credit hour if they're writing. That will also happen with continuing communication. Just as we have writing courses and then a non-writing version of that course, there will be communication courses and a non-communication version. So if a faculty wants to offer something without communication, they could do that. Our current students who are under our current GERs will be completing their writing requirements with the new communication courses. So they will still need 3 continuing writing courses under the old GERs, but they can satisfy them with courses that are tagged under communication. The other thing that's happening is, as you know, writing courses currently have a W attached to them. And for lots of interesting reasons, we have to keep that W. We don't have an option to put a C for communication. And so all the writing courses are just going to become communication courses, but they'll still be tagged as W.
So essentially what's required at this point, or whenever it becomes the required time to do this, we need to add or adjust the learning goals that we have right now, and make a couple adjustments to our syllabus and submit that as a continuing communication rather than writing. Okay, then that.
If there are courses that we don't receive proposals for, then the writing tag will be removed, and eventually the department can apply for communication if they want to, but they'll no longer be offered with writing.
And what is the timeline on that? I'm just curious for my own.
Yeah, so we're asking for proposals by May 15th of this year. And so if there are courses that departments are teaching next year, you definitely want to get those proposals in by May 15th. If you can get your other courses in by May 15th, it will be easier on you because the GER tagging website is a little bit easier because we're just asking for a syllabus, really. If you don't get through all of the courses, then they'll go through the regular curriculum committee process, but that's more involved, and that can happen at any point.
Okay, so that was my one clarifying question about my current writing course. And I will say to Juliet, my students this semester are really struggling with all the feedback that they did not struggle in the past. So there is definitely something about online, I think. But they're doing okay. One thing that has helped, but one thing that has helped is to show them how I respond to feedback. They really love that. Okay, so the other question that I have is for my, and I'm going to be teaching in the spring again, and it doesn't have a writing, it's not a writing course. So this is a question for, probably what's much further in the future, but just for my own information. I teach my digital inequality class with podcasting, very intensive podcasting development process, and which is super fun. I love it, but is very intensive. And the thing that I wondered about that course, and eventually potentially turning it into a communication course, is the final project. They do like a formal paper. They do all these modes, right? They do a formal paper, they write a script, they do have reflection. So I think it would definitely meet all these requirements. The only thing is that you cannot make a you can, but it's quite difficult to make a podcast at the level that they do without it being a group project. And so I've designed it as group projects. I'm not sure though, if that would meet the requirements, because I know like for a writing course, they need to be individual papers and 20 pages. So that would be my only clarifying thing is, with that structure of group produced podcasts, which I've found is really pretty necessary in order to complete the projects.
Yeah, I think that's fine. You will find that a lot of us have already been doing group projects for a long time that are just writing projects even. So if that modern communication style is that we work in communities. So I think you're right in the heart of like what matters in communication generally.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, Marilla? Earlier?
Yes, I'm sorry to ask yet another question for language, for the language sections. From listening to you and the requirements that we have at least 3 assignments, that they have different genres, that's 40% of the grade. This is our course from 101 upwards. So I'm guessing the question is, it's a continuing writing communication requirement. Of course, it's in the basic level of fluency, but they're doing all of those things. So at what point can it count? Can it count as an intermediate level class? They're not fluent yet. They're getting there. Can it count as a continuing communication class? Because we do this throughout, right, already.
Joanna, do you want me to take that, or do you want to take that?
You go ahead. I think she's asking, can a 100 level class count?
So, well, here's what I'll say. We have a tradition of tagging 300 and 400 language classes as continuing writing. And so I don't think the Expression and Communication Committee will have any problem tagging those courses as communication. Students do have an intercultural communication requirement. And so they have to take 2 courses in a language here at Emory. My sense is that the Expression and Communication Committee will probably not accept 100 level courses for continuing communication, knowing that many students will be using that for intercultural communication. I think there's an open question about 200. Yeah, I think that's probably an open question. And Joanna and I have a meeting with the Expression and Communication Committee in December, and this is something that we can bring up. But I don't know if they're going to put some firm guardrails around things just to keep things clear, or if they'll entertain, requests at the 200 level. I just don't know.
I think a couple of years back, we were looking at even the writing requirements and noticing that Spanish 212 almost fit the continuing writing requirement. I think the way we've been teaching it with very small tweaks would definitely fit this continuing communication requirement. And when I brought it up at a meeting, someone said, 200 level courses can't be tagged W. And then nobody was sure if that was true. So
no, that wasn't true.
We have 200 level courses in other disciplines, but those are taught in English. So
got to depend on the language, but it's Spanish 212. And I think we should, as we're having this conversation, we should think for sure about the Intro Portuguese for Spanish Speakers course, because those kids really are communicating a lot in their first semester. And if, I don't know, if the rule becomes that a 100 level course doesn't count for it, we should maybe change the number of the course, you know, and like call it Portuguese 200 or something instead of 110, because it really is more that level. So this is good things to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we are at time. Oh, Juliet?
Just a real quick question, but an important one. I just need clarity. Currently, we have courses that we can offer as W for 4 credits or not as W for 3 credits. Does that flexibility still hold? And when we submit, basically we're submitting to tag for communication, but we don't have to do it for the four credits every time. Is that correct?
Right, Juliet. So you are, you still have that flexibility to offer courses either as the W/communication version for 4 or non-communication for 3. And in this proposal process, we're really just asking you to update your syllabi to show that they reflect the new requirements for communication. And if they do, then the course will get the communication tag, but the 3 and 4 credit options will stay the same.
All right, everybody, thanks so much. And please share the news, help your colleagues with questions, because this next few months, there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of confusion, and we really appreciate everything. And feel free to point them to the OUE website and also to the Emory Writing Program website, where all the materials are going to be loaded. And just have a great end of your semester.
Thanks. Jason, can I ask you a question? If you stopped recording?
Yeah,
this?
once you want to stop.